Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the X's and O's with Greg Cosell. That's my good friend Greg Cosell of ESPN's NFL Matchup and NFL Films. Yeah, boy, we survived the draft just barely. I'm Doug Farrar of Touchdown Wire in the USA Today Sports Media Group. And yeah, Greg, a lot of tape watching, a lot of analysis. We're a bit bleary-eyed after it's all over, but we know where everyone went, and it's kind of cool to now move forward and project, okay, how do these guys fit in their new offenses? We'll do more detailed scheme fits later when we have time to sort of put all the pieces together. But this is kind of maybe call it our favorite guys outside the first round. Of course, we're cheating with the first guy, which is Ricky Pearsall to the 49ers, the Florida receiver who went 31st overall, but that's our flex. And with Pearsall, before we get into his traits and how he fits, the thing people were talking about with, Pearsall was taken here because the Niners are trading either Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk or whatever. He's not really either one of those guys. He's a player who can fill in the gaps to all levels of the field, but especially Pearsall and Arizona's Jacob Cowing, who San Francisco got in the fourth round. You have two new guys with speed from multiple alignments and two receivers who are really good with motion, especially Pearsall. Now the 49ers have Samuel and Ayuk. Juwan Jennings is the big contested catch guy, and the rookies with these different strengths. So that passing game all of a sudden becomes really interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned Cowing. We'll mention him as well. But Pearsall, he has inside outside flexibility, and it's an offense we know with the Niners. And again, we are getting a little bit into scheme just because you have to when you talk about a player like this.
Right.
But uh, obviously, they're a team with a lot of motion, a lot of reduced splits, so it's more difficult to press versus reduced splits. I thought Pearsall was one of the better route runners that I saw on tape. I thought he had a pretty refined understanding of how to use his vertical stem to attack and break down defensive backs. He used body feints, head movements. He gave his quarterback indicators, and
Yes.
so
I
people
wanted
understand.
you mentioned that before. I wanted you to explain that a little bit. What indicators
Yeah,
are.
when you run routes, you always hear about, well, a quarterback has to throw with anticipation. Well, there's different kinds of routes. Obviously, some routes are just based on yardage. Some routes are just based on they practice it so long that they know that, hey, if you're going to throw this particular route, he's going to place the ball here because that's where the receiver is going to be. But sometimes the defense kind of makes you run routes a little bit differently. I remember having this conversation years ago with Sterling Sharp that sometimes the defense forced you to adjust your route.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to stay within the timing of the quarterback's drop, because that's what has to time up the quarterback's drop and the route. If the quarterback's ready to throw and you're not in a position to make a catch, that's a problem. So what Pearsall does really well is he can give a quarterback an indicator, whether it's with a head feint, whether it's with sticking an inside foot or an outside foot. It's an indicator to the quarterback that he's going to make his break. And then the
Mm-hmm.
quarterback can then deliver the football to where it needs to be. And I thought Pearsall was good at that. And I thought that to use a term that we've used a number of times, which I think you like, I thought he was a pretty good separation generator. I thought he had plus quickness at the top of his route stem. We've seen his hands. Everybody has seen his hands with
Mm-hmm.
highlights.
Yeah.
You
We're going to
wouldn't
put up
say
the
he's an.
Charlotte play that everyone talks about, the one hander. And he had another similar play against LSU where it was a deeper ball and he had two defenders converging and he had to go up to get it. And he didn't care. He's not afraid of getting the grimy yards at all.
No, no, no. And you wouldn't call him explosive vertically in a strict sense, but I don't think that's really a weakness in his game because that's not what he will be asked to do really. Now, does that mean he can never run vertically? Of course not, but he's not a vertical dimension in the sense that, a 4-3 guy, in the sense Xavier Worthy is a vertical dimension,
Right.
so um Pearsall, to me, I liked his tape. I think he's in a really good spot
Mm-hmm.
where it plays to his strengths. And I think that he probably could be a factor as a rookie. Now, what that means for fantasy people who might be listening, I don't know. I don't know what his target share will be. Who knows if they'll still look to trade Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel, given that they did draft Pearsall and they did draft Jacob Cowing, who we'll get to in a moment. But I think he was a good prospect based on his tape, and he's landed in a good spot.
Yeah, what I wrote 6'1, 189-pound frame. He can win outside, not an XISO guy, but he'll bend it inside from tight splits, and he can run the three beater up the seam all day long. So that's.
And I think one point to make,
yeah,
and you and I do this. I think everybody who watches a lot of college tape does this. Um, we make comparisons when we feel they're appropriate. I know you don't do it, I don't do it. I don't sit around after I watch someone for 20 minutes and think who he's like. It either hits me or it doesn't hit me, And there's two ways to make comparisons. You either make comparisons with when you think of a player when he was coming out of college, which is different than what he's done in the league. Okay. A guy could come out of college and be a fifth round pick, and he's a fifth round pick for a reason. And then in the league, he becomes a really, really good player. And then people go, oh my God, you're comparing him to that guy. He's an all pro. Well, no. One way you compare is with players when they came out. And I'll give you an example. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a fourth round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I don't think Ricky Pearsall and Amon-Ra St. Brown are exactly the same, but I kind of thought of Amon-Ra St. Brown stylistically, not a true vertical dimension. He's obviously in a really well-schemed offense with the Detroit Lions. He's become a high volume receiver and a really good player. I think he just signed a big deal.
He did.
But he was a fourth round pick because he didn't have the traits that you normally associate with a first or second round pick. So if you're saying, well, someone is like Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'm saying that when he came out of USC, not the Amon-Ra St. Brown of the last year or two. And I think people have to make that distinction because it's a distinction I make all the time.
You and I both met. Well, I think I mentioned it. A couple weeks ago on our video, and you saw it too. And maybe in an offense that didn't have Debo and Ayuk, and the Lions didn't really have a guy when they took. And it was like when the Rams got Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp defined that offense over time. It's not that Pearsall will; it's that he has some of those traits.
Yeah, I mean, 57 of his 90 targets in 2023 came out of the slot.
Right.
So, that also means 33 came outside. So he's got that inside-outside versatility. And then it depends on deployment in the context of the 49ers. If they end up keeping Samuel and Ayuk, and we don't know any of this as we're speaking today, April 30th, he's probably not going to be a high-volume target. If they end up trading one, he may end up being a high-volume target.
Right. Well, as much, 21 personnel as they run, and it also depends on like how you want your players deployed. We just like the player for that scheme.
Correct. And let's get to Jacob Cowing. I was kind of glad you mentioned him. I've watched Jacob Cowing, believe it or not, for 3 years in a row because I thought he might come out. In 2021, he was at UTEP and he transferred to Arizona. And when he was at UTEP, he was used totally differently than he was at Arizona. At Arizona, he became kind of a short to intermediate receiver who every once in a while might run vertically. When he was at UTEP, he was a vertical dimension, and he ran a 4.38 40. And this guy can run. I mean, he's got natural quickness as a route runner. He runs precise routes. But like I said, when he was at UTEP, he was a vertical player. And even though, he's 5'8 3/4, I think we saw what Tank Dell did a year ago with the Houston Texans. Cowing probably has more vertical speed. Dell's probably just more explosive laterally, although Cowing's still pretty good in that regard. But I'm really curious to see him because he can run. And that's the Niners don't truly have that guy. I mean, Ayuk is not slow, but, they don't have a true vertical dimension. So it'll be interesting to see how they see him. Now he'll probably end up being a return man with the new rules, but he was really interesting to me because I watched his 2021 tape from UTEP a couple of summers ago, but I remembered it really well. He was a vertical guy.
I'm watching the 35-yard touchdown against Oklahoma right now where he ran that seam route and just against quarters and scalded everybody. We're going to put that play up. Yeah,
I think I know the play you're talking about.
He's an exciting guy. So let's say they keep Debo and Ayuk, and now they have these two guys, and Jawan Jennings is a sort of late career Anquan Bolden who can just Godzilla every cornerback. And it's like, wow, that passing game all of a sudden, goodness. And they got Garendo, the combine star, the running back, who's a natural for outside zone. They had some interesting picks, but we don't want to. We have another 49ers player to get into who we both love, Renardo Green. cornerback from Florida State. Went with the 32nd or 64th overall pick in the second round. Now, we had discussed before with his size, he's right on the precipice of, slot and outside size, whatever that means. Kyle Shanahan said that they're going to work to have him play outside and inside. John Lynch said he told us 15 times when he called him, you got a dog, and that's exactly what we thought when we drafted him. And when John Lynch says that the defensive back is a dog, we should probably listen. And that is his playing personality. Just to start with Green, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago, this guy kind of put Malik Neighbors in jail when they played LSU, which is pretty impressive. So get into, what you like about Renardo Green and how you think he fits in that defense.
Well, in 2 years starting at Florida State, he played more than 1,100 snaps outside and only about 30 snaps in the slot. Mm-hmm. So he'd have to be taught to play in the slot. Yes. But the reason you're saying that, not just you, people, is, he is 6 feet. He weighs 186, but he is 6 feet. He's not a small little guy. And he is super, super aggressive. Again, I'm going to give you a comparison, and it's not an exact one, but watching him play with how tenacious and aggressive he was and how physical he was at the line of scrimmage, I started to see a little L'Jarius Sneed just stylistically in the way in which he played. And again, I'm making this point, just the point I made a moment ago. Sneed was a 4th-round pick in the 2020 draft. So we now look at Sneed and say he's one of the top 5 corners in the league, but he was a 4th-round pick. So, you have to think of it that way. But I really like Green. I watched him last summer from 2022 tape. I watched him, obviously, this year from 2023 tape. And he's just really good in press, playing both mirror match and then at times with targeted physicality. He disrupted receivers' releases. He stayed connected with them with smooth hips. Even though he's not a burner, he ran a 4.49. He did run with the vertical routes.
He's faster on the field than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some will say, well, does he have enough top-end speed? On tape, he does. Now he's going to the next level, but we'll see. But I just really like the way in which he played corner. He's got natural quickness. He's got some sudden movement to him. He can match up man-to-man on an island. I thought he was pretty good in zone as well. He came from a school, Florida State. They were a man-heavy defense, and he played a ton of press man. So he has a lot of experience playing press man.
And press man, I remember talking to Richard Sherman about being an island cornerback a long time ago. He said that there's a mentality, and he said, sorry, kids. He said, you have to let your nuts hang. That's Sherman. That's what he said. And that's what it is. That's how you have to be.
And you know what? You're going to get beat. The thing is, when you watch tape and you see a guy get beat, you can't automatically say, oh, well, that's a negative. He can't play. Guys, corners do get beat, and they get beat playing all kinds of coverage, and they do get beat playing press when you play really quality receivers. But you made the point of playing LSU. I wouldn't have quite worded the way you did, but he obviously had a really good battle with Malik Neighbors, and he played mirror match against him at a pretty high level.
He broke up a deep fade in the end zone, and he got an interception when he was covering Neighbors so closely and so aggressively, the Neighbors fell down on the route, and so it was.
Yeah, so I mean, you're dealing with a guy that's a highly competitive physical press man corner that when you watch the tape, at times he just suffocated short and intermediate routes.
Yes.
And I thought even in off coverage, didn't play a ton of it, but I thought he did show really explosive plant and drive quickness. He read the routes. He triggered with speed. I really liked the player. And again, we stayed on the Niners here, but he may well have a chance to start.
I think so. Yeah, what I wrote, he's a complete pain in the ass when he's pressed up on the receiver and follows to the boundary and anything vertical. He'll glue himself to his guy. He's very tough to shake. Very smart in his transitions and man match. He'll move foot for foot with the receiver. Has a good sense of landmark switches and zone coverage. Brings some value as a free blitzer in open space, which is another way, because before L'Jarius Sneed became like a true outside corner, he would play outside, but he was also like a slot blitz guy. He got a lot of pressures off of that. So, another way that similarity proves true.
Yep.
Our next guy, and this is one of my guys early on. I watched him first when I was in Indianapolis, and I just was giggling in the combine media room, like, "Oh my God, who is this guy?" Marshawn Nealon from Western Michigan to the Cowboys, round two, pick 24, 56th overall. And I think I watched him before you did, and I kept saying, "Greg, you got to watch this guy. Greg, you got to watch this guy." So I will defer to you, sir. What did you like about Marshawn Nealon's tape?
Yeah, he was kind of a fun watch. I mean, he ended up having really pretty good testing measurables too at the combine. Really long arms too. Outstanding 20-yard shuttle, the kind of 20-yard shuttle you normally see with a wide receiver. This guy, he plays a strong man's game. I mean, he's got a power profile. He's got heavy hands in the run game. He's got forceful speed to power conversion as an edge rusher. I thought, along with Jared Verse, that he may have been the most explosive speed to power conversion edge rusher of any guy in the draft. So that's the way I saw him. And the other thing that really stood out, and it makes it really interesting with the Cowboys, given that they have Micah Parsons as well, is he stood up a lot as a stand-up joker. They moved him around an awful lot.
They had him in that kind of spinner role at the second level, like off ball sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now, I would say that just when you look at his physical and athletic traits, Doug, he's more stiff than flexible as an athlete. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got really good short area quickness and burst, but he's not a loose pass rusher.
No,
He's not a flexible guy.
no.
So I think he needs to broaden his arsenal of pass rush and counters in the league to become a higher level rusher as an edge rusher for
Mhm.
sure. But I think that just the explosiveness off the ball,
Yep.
the use of the one arm stab, which is a speed to power element.
Yep.
It
I always
really
think of
showed
Von
up
Miller
on
when
tape.
when I see that and I saw that. I always think of Von Miller, who was like the best I've ever seen at it. He would put that arm out, and you just go backward.
Yeah, and the guy he kind of reminded me of, and again, now I'm talking about coming out of college, okay? So take note, people. I'm talking about coming out of college. I kind of saw a little Khalil Mack when Khalil Mack came out of Buffalo.
Okay.
And obviously, Khalil Mack was a top 10 pick in the draft and has gone on. I think he led the league in sacks last year. He's had obviously a very good career. But, I think Nealon kind of reminded me stylistically of Khalil Mack. When I watched Mack, Mack was in the same draft, as many might recall, as Jadeveon Clowney.
Hmm.
And Max turned out to be a better pure rusher than Clowney in the NFL. I think Nealon needs to, as I said, add some more tools to his toolbox, Doug. But I think just that power element to his game is, I mean, he's just fun to, and plus he's super competitive. I
Oh,
mean, this guy had a charged up, revved up motor, snap after snap.
yeah. He had a sack against Eastern Michigan where he moved from a bull rush to a spin, and the left tackle was like, "Well, what do I do with that?" It's like, whoa. So he does have some moves. I can
Oh,
see.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. You're talking about the one where he started the inside spin and the cross face counter
Yeah,
versus Eastern. Yeah, I
yeah.
remember that one.
Oof, that left tackle didn't know what to do. I saw some Zadarius Smith in his game.
I would
Uh,
agree with that too.
yeah, just because he can win from multiple gaps and all that, but he's just fun. And you know, obviously the Cowboys went from Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer. I don't think Zimmer's going to stunt as much as Quinn did because Quinn is all about that. I don't know, but woe be the offensive line that has to deal with those two guys. Moving around like that. I mean, he's a player for today's game in the versatility and the power. And as you like to say, power translates from wherever you are.
Power normally does translate. That's the thing. I mean, nothing's 100%, but power normally does translate.
Yep. Trying to see if I had any notes that were can win everywhere from edge alignment to head over nose. Relentless disruptor works from snap to whistle. Stacks and sheds quickly and powerfully. 83 and 3/8 inch wingspan, 90th percentile for edge rushers, allowed him to establish dominance from the snap. Brings extra juice as an off-ball spinner who can time rushes and work to the quarterback in a hurry from the second level. I mentioned the spin move. Frenetic style, having missing targets in the backfield at times. Could have more of a plan with his hands to knife through double teams and penetrate through more adept opponents. But these things are coachable, and the raw traits are just exceptional. And it's not raw because you think of, okay, he dominated at that level, but when you watch his tape, it's like, okay, you see an NFL guy here.
Yeah, I mean, he's got really strong, heavy hands, and normally, as we said, that translates. When I mentioned the one arm stab, that's part of a speed to power profile.
Yep.
Um, I thought he did a good job too when he was in that Joker alignment, the stand
Mhm.
up alignment. I thought he did a really good job of attacking what we call half a man. He'd attack the outside edge. He'd work
Yes.
the edges of whoever he was attacking, a center or a guard. I thought he did a good job with that.
Yeah. So when we say Khalil Mack and Zadarius Smith, I mean, we're not talking about like as like, and I know Greg, you're all about getting people to be realistic about the comparisons, but that's what we're saying here, that these are traits and characteristics that are common among the players.
Stylistically, yes, that's the
Yes.
key point.
Okay, Greg, the Dolphins. They are the conceptual answer to what if we built the entire plane out of the black box. They want speed, they're going to get it, and they got Malik Washington somehow in the 6th round, Virginia receiver. Washington had 110 catches last season, 24 explosive receptions. We have talked about his touchdown against Duke, where he caught a simple slant, stiffed arm to safety, and ran like past 5 guys to score. He led all receivers in this class in yards after catch last season with 710, and he'll bowl through cornerbacks to get more on the field. The weight part of his 5'8" and a half, 191-pound frame shows up as a positive when he needs to do that. So, um, again, your take on Washington and how he fits with this NFL team, because now I'm seeing Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and all this, and all of a sudden now you have this guy over the middle who can just go through people. That could be a problem for opponents.
Yeah, he also ran through Peyton Wilson, the North Carolina State linebacker, on a 59-yard tunnel screen reception. So you're talking about a guy that's short but not small, and he's a powerful guy. I think most people will automatically say slot just because he's 5'8.5". But this is why I think it's a really good fit, because we know what Mike McDaniel does with the Miami Dolphins, moves receivers around. He's not beholden to a guy's an X, a guy is Z, a guy is a slot. He's not that guy as a coach with his passing game. So it's easy to say, based on the 5'8.5", that Washington is a slot receiver. And assuming he does play a lot, we have no idea right now at the end of April. But let's say he does, it's not going to be just in the slot and that's it. He's got really outstanding route quickness. He's got
Mm,
great run after catch. I would say, though, what really stood out, Doug, was his focus and hands. He
mm,
almost always caught the ball away from his frame, elite body control. He adjusted and contorted his body.
yes,
Really good ball tracking skills for a smaller receiver. He caught through contact, and he
yes,
caught in traffic when the contact was imminent. He knew the
yes.
contact was coming, and he made catches.
What I
Um,
wrote, he has no issue catching the ball when defenders are converging. He's about to get whomped. He has a running back's mentality when it comes to contact. You don't see that in a lot of smaller receivers.
no, you don't. And I thought that even though he's smaller, I thought he totally maximized his catch radius. Now, obviously, he's not going to have the same catch radius as Roma Dunze, and his arms are just over 30 inches, so he doesn't have long arms. But he maximized all that. I mean, you could argue that there are clear limitations to his game simply
Yeah.
because he is 5'8.5". But I think that the evolution of the NFL passing game and where he was drafted by Miami could mitigate against that smaller size and really allow him to be a factor.
Well, when you use motion as creatively as McDaniel does, or Kyle Shanahan does, or a few other teams in the NFL, the delineation between X, Y, and Z and slot, it gets really blurry, because where guys are lined up pre-snap is not where they're going. So, okay, this guy was an X, now he's a Z. What do we do now? As far as, designation and the formation and all that. And I think Malik Washington can really thrive on that, because he's so good anyway at, getting under zone and being able to know when a cornerback's on him in man or match and getting away from it. So he's already got those traits. You add that to the creative motion and the fact that people are already dealing with Hill and Waddle in motion, and it's like, oh, well, okay, who's where? It becomes tough. And he adds a level of difficulty for the defense in that regard.
Yeah, and he's certainly not Waddle. I mean, the size is similar to Waddle, but he's not Waddle. Waddle ran a 4.29, and I think Washington ran a 4.47. So he's not Waddle. So he can regulate and take the top off the defense in the same
No,
way that Waddle can. And it's not a direct comparison, but he does have natural quickness and explosiveness. and he has great run after catch. That kind of demands you get the ball in his hands.
Yep.
So he's a really interesting guy. And I thought, again, I never know where guys are going to get drafted. And I knew he wasn't going to be drafted higher simply because he's a certain kind of player. But I think he went to a really good offense for what he is.
Well, Mike McDaniel, they showed the video of him calling Malik Washington, and McDaniel said, "I've been bugging Chris Greer for 2 rounds about you." And
Yeah, because I think that, it fits. It
yeah,
totally fits.
and it's perfectly fine that he doesn't have Waddle's top end speed because that's not what they got him for. That
No, and they
you
have
know that
Waddle.
you know that Dolphins passing game. A lot of it is Tua finding the guy underneath, and Tua that's a quick passing game to a large degree, and the fact that it's quick and vertical. Well, part of the reason they get those speed guys is you can do vertical with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle you said like the 3-step passing game and the 5-step passing game, the timing of those drops. Well, with the Dolphins, with these guys, you can get the ball out 20 yards downfield in 1.5 seconds because they have those guys. But a lot of the time it's Tua taking the shot over the middle. And that's where he becomes a feature.
Yeah, no question. I think it's a really good fit. I really liked the player when I watched his tape, and again, so much of this has to do with how players will be deployed in the
Yep.
league. Because a lot of times you watch a player, and the people, a lot of people that obviously evaluate players, and they'll say things like, "Well, he's so and so is not going to make contested catches." Well, depending on who the player is, that's not what he is. No one in the NFL would ask someone that particular. I remember when I did Lad McConkey, and someone said, "Well, if you line him up outside the numbers, he doesn't have great strength." Well, yeah, no, he doesn't. But you know what? He's not going to be asked to do that. So, you have to think about how players at all positions, by the way, are going to be deployed in the league. And teams know what they can and can't do. And just because you can't do a particular thing doesn't mean you're not a really good prospect or can succeed at a high level in the league.
Well, Greg, Malcolm Young couldn't play guitar like Eddie Van Halen, so obviously he stinks, right? Go figure. Well, it brings up just to break out conceptually here for a moment, and I think you would agree because we both do this and we've been doing it for a long time. There's kind of 2 levels of evaluation with these guys. There's the evaluation in the vacuum before they're drafted. What are his traits,
Yep.
his attributes, kind of where does it go? And then there's the second evaluation after he's drafted. Okay, so they're now in this offense or in this defense, how does he fit? So
Right.
there's 2 levels of evaluation with college prospects. It's not just the one thing or the other.
No, you always start with their traits and their attributes. You have to, because you have to see what a guy is.
So then you
But
have that background, and then from there you push it forward.
then from there, you have to think about deployment in the league.
Right. Deployment in the league. We're okay. Round 2, pick 28, 60th overall. One of our favorite guys, Cole Bishop to the Bills. Boy, we both like him. I know. I read I saw you on One Bills Live. Talking about why you liked him. So let's get into Cole Bishop, which boy, that secondary got old in a hurry.
Yeah,
both,
it did,
both,
and
both
and
high
they
and
needed
quick.
a safety.
That happened overnight. And they have Taylor Rapp. They've got some interesting guys. But what does Cole Bishop bring to Buffalo's defense?
And again, I really like the player and I like his traits, but it's a really good spot for him as well because one thing that they do a lot with their safeties is they're interchangeable, meaning that you have to be able to play both down in the box and you have to be able to play on the back end. And I think that Bishop can do that. It's very weird because he's 6'2", 206. The only negative he really has is he has ridiculously short arms for that height, but I don't think that really impacts the way in which he plays. Overall, he's got really good size. He's physical. He's athletic. He played multiple spots. He even played some post safety in cover 1 and cover 3, and I thought that he could do that without a problem. I thought that his transitions were smooth and fluid. I thought he could change direction. He could plant and drive downhill on routes in front of him. We know he can play in the box. I just think that he's a really good player with a really good skill set, really good profile of traits: size, movement, versatility, competitiveness, savvy, intelligent. There wasn't much for me, and I watched him last summer as well from 2022. There wasn't much to me that I did not like about Cole Bishop.
The play I want to put up this week, we had him hammering a USC receiver before coming down. But I went back and watched his tape this morning. His interception versus Oregon State, I know you watched this play. He was pressed up at the line, essentially. He was playing press against the tight end, Jack Velling. Velling tried to push him off press. Bishop wasn't having it. He ran Velling's route about as well as Velling did and got the pick. You could see Velling's frustration after the play. And I want a safety who's going to piss off opposing tight ends. That he did it in essentially press was pretty impressive. You don't see a lot of deep third safeties coming down and doing that.
No, I mean, he was man-to-man on the tight end. He also blitzed off the edge. He had a sack versus Florida in which he beat the running back. Then he also green dogged as well. He was really good at that. What a green dog means is if you're matched on a tight end or a back man-to-man and they stay into pass protect, instead of just standing there, you then add into the pass rush. You attack. So people might say, "Oh, he's blitzing." Well, he's rushing as an add-in because his man-to-man responsibility stayed into pass protect. He was very good at that as well. He just struck me as a really complete safety, big, physical, moved well. I thought he tackled well too, and that's often an overlooked trait. So to me, he was kind of a complete safety. Maybe the reason he wasn't viewed as a first-round pick, and I don't know if any teams had him there, it's possible they did, is he's not a special athlete. He's not sudden and twitchy, but he's just a notch below all that.
Yeah, I would say, the on-field speed stands out over and over on tape. Gives the ability to play row from blitzer to robber to post safety. Can match and carry speed receivers up the chute into either boundary. Has true sideline-to-sideline burst both as a safety and occasionally as an outside cornerback. Nice back pedal, can turn and play. Very versatile in coverage. And Utah has kind of a cottage industry of guys coming into the league lately. And I think one point that is important that I know you made on One Bills Live, and I agree, is Utah is one of the more flexible and different and interesting defenses.
I would agree. Yes,
they play a lot of stuff, and it makes their guys, their players, a bit more NFL conversant.
I would agree with that. And I did make that point because the tape tells you that.
Yeah.
And Bishop was asked to do a lot of things, the kinds of things he'll be asked to do in the NFL.
They got Mike Edwards too. They have Taylor Rapp, and it's interesting because I'm not saying he's both Poyer and Hyde, but he can do some of what Poyer did and some of what Hyde did. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, that's the point. They want their safeties to be interchangeable, and Bishop, I think, can fit that role.
Okay, A.D. Mitchell to the Colts. This is an interesting one. Round 2, pick 50, 52nd overall. Chris Ballard, their GM, went off on this not safe for work rant about anonymous scouts and all this thing they said about A.D. Mitchell, and I'm going to defend the kid and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you still got him in the second round, Chris. And my only
and again, I heard from someone that, there might have been some issues that people had with the kid. I'm not going to go there. I don't know the answer.
I'm not going to go there either.
He's better than the 45th pick, I believe he was.
52nd, I think.
Oh, well, whatever he was. I had a coach who's been in the league close to 30 years. And again, it just shows you the difference in evaluation and why, you can't get caught up in what people say in generally. But I had a coach tell me that he had him as his third best receiver in the draft. He had Neighbors 1, Harrison 2, Mitchell 3. So, and this is a guy who's been coaching in the league for 30 years on the offensive side of the ball. So, but anyway, Mitchell, he's got great size, really a strong, solid frame, really good hands. He caught the ball away from his frame. He's really good in and out of his breaks. He ran a ton of in-breaking routes at Texas, and he was really good in and out of his breaks. I mean, I thought that he had really good short area quickness and burst. He created separation. He caught a ton of balls in the middle. I thought he was a really, really good prospect, and to me, just watching his tape, that's all I'm doing. I'm not interviewing kids. I'm not doing all the other stuff. Just watching his tape, I felt like it wouldn't surprise me if he was a top 10 receiver in the league. At some point, I'm not going to say that's going to happen year one. I don't, you never know, but he's going to get an opportunity with Indianapolis.
Sometimes we make NFL comps, it's because one thing stands out and it's rare. And the reason I comped him to Justin Jefferson, hold on, Vikings fans, but and you and I have discussed this about Jefferson. When he runs any sort of speed vertical route where he has to cut in and out, there's no lag when he cuts. He cuts at the same speed that he runs in a straight line at, and that's really
No, he
hard.
doesn't have to slow down or shorten his stride length in order to make those cuts. You're right.
Mitchell has that same thing, and it's one of the first things that stood out when I watched the tape. I'm like, oh, geez, that's special.
Yeah,
Same
no,
thing with-
you're right. That's, and I think I heard. I'm trying to remember. I thought I heard Shane Steichen make the point that he was really good in and out of his breaks.
Yep.
You know, and he is. I mean, the tape tells you that. You know,
Yeah.
he wasn't making that up.
I wrote sinks into his breaks on digs and slants like a 5-year NFL veteran. He's really well formed in practice as a route runner overall. Yeah. So, and they have a lot of good pieces. They don't really have that alpha dog receiver, so maybe he can be that guy. I don't.
Yeah, they just signed Michael Pittman, who I think is really good,
He is.
but he's not. Mitchell's obviously a more explosive player.
Yeah, Pittman's like an A- or B+. Great player. Any team would want him, but you know, it's just different. A few quick cuts here before we go. Jalen McMillan to the Buccaneers, and I read somewhere today the Huskies are the first. The first NCAA team to have a quarterback and 3 receivers taken in the same draft. But you know, so McMillan was he wasn't
all in the top 3 rounds too.
Yeah. So Jalen McMillan to the Bucs, guy with a really nice feel for how to get open at the intermediate and deep levels of the field against zone. He'll work man and press coverage with foot movement at the line of scrimmage and deceptive speed. Took 92% of his snaps in the slot last season. I think he's a really nice compliment to Evans and Godwin. He's a different slot guy than Trey Palmer, who's more explosive into vertical routes off the snap. 6'1", 192, and he's certainly proven he can be effective in a vertical offense. Definitely a receiver with the ability to win in a Liam Cohen offense, and he's their new OC.
Yeah, I really like this kid. I did him last summer, and believe it or not, when I did him last summer, and he was hurt a lot this year, so he didn't play a full season in 2023. When I did him last summer, and I did a Dunze as well last summer, I really liked McMillan. I'm not going to sit here and say I liked him more, but I didn't think there was a big difference between the two of them when I watched McMillan last summer.
He was more prolific last year because he was healthy.
Correct.
Right.
He's got really good length. I mean, I know that a large percentage of his targets come out of the slot, but I think he has inside-outside versatility because he is 6'1".
Yeah. They just had other guys outside, ball winners and Odunze. I mean, hey, went 9
right, and they had Pope too. So, so I think he does have that flexibility. I think he's really smooth. He's really fluid. I think he's got deceptive route and play speed because he just looks so smooth. The way he was deployed in that offense had a lot of intermediate and vertical elements to it, and he was a part of that.
Yep.
So I just really like the player. I like the way he moves. He's so smooth and fluid. A lot of times you watch guys like that, and you think, well, they're not really moving. Can that translate? But they move better than you think.
Yes.
And obviously he's not a burner. He ran a 4.47, which, by the way, is not bad at all. And his 20-yard shuttle time was really, really good. And the 20-yard shuttle time, a lot of people look at for direction change, those kinds of things. But I really liked his tape. I guess he went 3rd round.
3rd round, 92nd pick overall.
Yeah, my sense is if he was not injured this year, he probably would have gone higher.
I think so. Well, the thing that stood out to me about McMillan, and of course I'm in Seattle, so I watched it when it happened, but he has a really, and this is I think an undersold attribute. He has a really nice feel at the college level. He's already got this in his head of how to get open in zone. He understands, and this, a lot of cover 3 deep catches where he just kind of understands, okay, this is the chessboard. This is what I've got. He knows how to break outside of coverage, sit in the gaps, and that really impressed. The physical traits and how he can beat man, that's fine. But I like a guy at the college level who understands how to beat, the zone stuff.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good pick. I mean, look, they obviously still have Evans. They re-signed him. They've got Godwin.
Yeah.
They drafted Palmer last year, a later round pick.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see how many snaps McMillan gets if they feel like he's ready, because obviously Palmer's coming back. But a new offensive coordinator, obviously, this year, so it will be a little different.
Well, you're very familiar with Cohen. Do you think he's a guy who would put 4 receivers on the field a lot?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But I think McMillan fits that offense really well because he's already got a ton of slot experience. He's worked closer to the formation. All that offense, just so people understand, Liam Cohen's background is with the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
So, you see a lot of those reduced cut splits. I think that fits McMillan's game.
Yeah, it does. We have to talk about one of your guys, Trey Benson, to the Cardinals with the 66th overall pick. Big guy, and we discussed it. You told me about him, and then I watched him like, whoa. Big guy, can run through skinny gaps, is explosive in the open field. We talked about some similarities to Isaiah Pacheco in his game before. He also reminds me of Raheem Mostert a bit. And I think, James Conner was their top back in 2023. I think Trey Benson is going to see a lot of action pretty quickly.
That's interesting because I don't see Mostert, but I could see your Pacheco comparison. But to me, he was one of the few backs in this draft that you could say could be a primary back in terms of number of carries.
Yeah.
In a given, now keep in mind, he didn't really do that in college. He only had one game of 20 or more carries in 2 seasons at Florida State, but that's not the way they played.
Right.
But I thought
he transferred from Oregon where they barely used him at all.
Yeah, and he came out of Mississippi as a 3-star recruit, so he went from Mississippi to Oregon to Florida State.
He's well traveled.
But he's a really interesting. I thought he was at his best as a gap scheme runner in the context of what they did offensively. His path was defined. He could work off the blocks of the puller and or the wrapper. He had downhill burst. He had accelerating speed. He had a touchdown run against Miami. I believe it was a 38-yarder, if I remember correctly. That was just a great snapshot of Benson as a runner. It was a gap scheme concept, and the explosive accelerating speed at the second and third levels for a man who's 216 pounds. So I really like it. I mean, you wouldn't say he's loose-hipped and shifty, but there's a sustaining running traits element to him. He's relentless. He's got great contact balance. He's got natural power, and he's got accelerating speed. I mean, yes, he can run.
He does. Yeah, especially for that size, it's pretty. One more guy I wanted to mention since we talked yesterday, and you said you liked him too, and I like him a lot. Is Bub Means from Pitt to the Saints receiver. He was one of the guys that I was walking around the podiums, and I talked to like 40 guys. What was your best play in college? And he had a 75-yard touchdown against Virginia Tech. Strong right Pontiac over the intermediate crosser to keep the cornerback from rolling deep with Means in cover 1. 41 catches last season, 12 were explosive plays.
And he also played with, I think, 4 different quarterbacks, and they were really bad at quarterback.
They were horrible at quarterback. Yeah, one of the notes I made, he's going to be better in the NFL because somebody can actually throw him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, he would have had much bigger numbers with better quarterback play.
And he was so nice about the quarterback. I love the kid. I got to talk to him for 20 minutes. It's just great.
I thought he was really an interesting play. It's funny, just without getting into all the detail. First of all, he ran really well for a guy that's 6'1", 212.
Yep.
Got really big hands, which is really important for a receiver. I finished watching him, and I just came away saying to myself, that guy looks like an NFL receiver. Yep. He's got excellent size. He's got a powerful feel to his movement. He's got build-up speed to be a viable vertical dimension. He ran a lot of in-breaking routes. He caught the ball in the middle of the field.
Yep.
And I think that's always important.
Fearlessly.
Yes.
No problem at all with it.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a big body. He's got strong yet soft hands. That's essential. The more I watched him, the more I liked him. I think he could have the opportunity. The Saints drafted him. And again, obviously they have Olave. They've got a few other guys. He may get a chance there because they don't really have another guy you think of and go, yeah, that guy is for sure their second receiver.
Right.
But I just came away, like I said, some guys you watch and you just say to yourself, that guy looks like an NFL player. This guy to me looked like an NFL player.
I think one thing I like, and that's why I love to go to the combine to actually talk to these guys, is he was relentlessly excited about football. And he was so charged up about talking about plays and, what did you do this? And MJ Devonshire, their cornerback, they went up against each other. And I love Devonshire is one of my guys. And he's so competitive and so positive about it. I would imagine he crushed it in the interviews with teams, but
And you know, keep one thing in mind. He lined up predominantly on the outside in 2023, but in 2022 he was much more of a slot receiver. So he
Yeah.
has extensive experience playing both. So he gives you outside inside versatility based on his college background.
He's a bigger guy with the speed of a smaller guy. That's always good.
Yeah, no, he was. You know, when I watched him, when I watch guys like that, Doug, I always think to myself, let's say he played, you know, I know Pitt's Power Five because it's ACC, but obviously had the bad quarterback play. Let's say he played in the SEC and looked exactly the same. Would he have been a third round pick? You know, sometimes I always wonder about that when I watch guys. You
Let's say
know,
he played at USC with Caleb Williams.
yeah, I mean, would all of a sudden people think that whereas his traits are exactly the same, but would he just be thought of differently?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you know, when Randy Moss went from the Raiders to the Patriots, you just never know. Greg, as always, you crush it. Great stuff post draft. We're going to be getting into a lot of summer stuff with schemes and, you know, NFL transitions and how offenses and defense have changed and all kinds of cool conceptual stuff. But that's part one of our post draft analysis. And we'll be talking to you again in the X's and O's next week.
Looking forward to it, Doug.